Hi, my name is Chris, and I'm the host of the Birding Life Youth Podcast, the show where we talk to young birders to find out what makes them tick. On this podcast, my co-host Mark Haystack and I had the wonderful opportunity of speaking to Josh Kleyn. We spoke about his work in Raptor Rehabilitation, as well as many other topics. So without further ado, please welcome Josh. All right, I want to welcome to the show our co-host, Mark Haystack, and a big welcome to our guest for today, Josh Kleyn.
Thank you very much.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Josh.
So I'm 22 years old, 22 in February. And for the past 12 years, I've been involved in bird of prey rehabilitation and just volunteering at centres across the country. I'm originally from KZN. I'm now living in George. And in KZN, when I was 10 years old, I started volunteering at the African Bird of Prey Sanctuary. And I started learning all about the birds of prey, and that's where I got my passion for them. And as it went on, I started helping out at other centres across the years, like Freeme, KZN, and Crow down in Durban. So, yeah, I have a passion for my raptors, and yeah.
Like you say, you're involved in Raptor Rehabilitation. How, why, and when did you decide to actually get involved in this? Because this is quite a strange place to actually get involved.
Yeah. So basically, when I was volunteering at the African Bird of Prey Sanctuary in KZN, I enjoyed the birds and everything, but I'm not much of a people's person. So at the Bird of Prey Sanctuary is where all the guests come, and the non-releasable raptors, they are on display for educational purposes, and so you're dealing with people as well as the birds. But there was also the rehabilitation side of it, Raptor Rescue Rehabilitation Center, and I had the opportunity to rather go and help on that side of things. So that's what I did. I jumped right in there and then focused only on the birds and not really working with people as well. And then my passion for it just grew as I started to learn more.
And what are some of the things that you've learned about raptors that you think a lot of people might not see when they are looking at them through the binos? Like, what is something that you've learned working close with these birds?
Well, there's been a few things, and through when a bird's up close with you and it's in your hand, or you're examining it on an examination table or something like that to that effect, or you're dealing with it up close, then you see a lot more features, if I can say, and you can kind of see, okay, the jackal buzzard has a big head compared to your steppe buzzard, and certain shapes of its head, and the different things like that. And then with your owls, things I learned is about their facial dish, for example, and how that works, and how the facial dish catches sounds and pushes it into their ears. And with your barn owl, their ears aren't on the same level. The one is actually higher than the other one, and the one is square and the one is round. And they have selective hearing, so they have little flaps over their ears, and they choose what they want to hear. So yeah, it's not only things that I learned how to identify birds, but rather also more details about the birds, having them so close up.
And you weren't always a birder per se. Like, you didn't really go looking out for birds, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, you and Mark. How did you actually take that first step in birding? Like, what was the first thing that you did? Did you go out and get a certain book, or was it first binos? What was it?
Yeah, well, so my mom used to work on at Pinder Game Reserve in KZN. So she's always had a passion for wildlife as well, and she's always looked at the birds and stuff. So it's a bit of influence from there. And then I started volunteering at the African Bird of Prey Sanctuary, and then I got the influence for raptors. And then when I moved to George, and then the lockdown happened, and then there was the lockdown birding challenge and on Bird Lasser. and I heard about it through the one group I am on for the George birding area, and so I decided to join that and test my abilities on the on your normal basic birds, um, or as I usually call them, the raptor food birds. um, so yeah, and then just recently, actually, I got my first Roberts book. We had an old one in the house, but I got the new one. Yeah, and we had some binos lying around from my mom. So yeah.
And do you think that working up close and personal with raptors has actually helped you learn how to identify them in the field?
Yes, of course. In certain aspects, yes, and in others, no. But definitely, and so when I started volunteering, I didn't really have an interest in raptors themselves, but I did have an interest in wildlife in general. So I didn't, before that, have a bird book and be like, okay, this is the identification features according to the book, how to identify these birds. I kind of just, as I volunteered, I set up in my mind my own identification features for each of the birds. So it's pretty difficult for me when I see a raptor and I identify it as something, say a Wahlberg's eagle, or anything, then and someone asks me, okay, how do you identify it? Sometimes it can be tricky for me to say, no, it's because of this and that, because I didn't really have a book that was like, okay, these are the identification features, but rather working with them, I've seen, okay, this is a peregrine falcon and that's a long-crested eagle, and this is the differences that I see on them, etc., etc. So, yeah.
I think I've interviewed you enough so far. So I heard that there's a little bit of controversy in the garden route. And Mark, are you willing to take over and tell us a little bit about that?
Well, firstly, how's it, guys? It's great to be back on the podcast and as my first time as the co-host. But yeah, let me open this discussion. I think the main question is to you, Josh. Does the mystery buzzard exist? Because there's this huge mystery going on in the Western Cape about these interesting buzzards that we've seen, and even recently. So could you answer that, Josh?
Yeah, so I believe that personally there isn't a mystery buzzard. But yeah, so working with the raptors up close, I've seen very different or many different morphs and different stages of the birds and molts in buzzards and all the other birds too. But yeah, with the buzzards, I've seen lots of different stages and lots of different color morphs, like I say. So I think that when someone can't relate to what they normally identify a certain species of buzzard with certain identification points, then they kind of label it a mystery buzzard. For example, when I went on an outing with the Lakes Bird Club as a guest or whatnot, and we were driving in the Mossel Bay area on our way to Full Flay, I think, and there was a buzzard in the field, and in my car, I think Mark was in my car, Justin may have also been in the car, and I identified it as a steppe buzzard. And then when we drove a bit further and everyone stopped and got out of the car, a couple of people asked, did you see that buzzard? And I was like, yeah, it was a steppe buzzard. And they were kind of leaning towards, no, it's a mystery buzzard. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. But I mean, many people look at a buzzard, and we've got three buzzards in the area that look very similar and can very often be misidentified because of their different stages in plumage and age. So, what are like some of the features that can be distinguished between the jackal buzzard, common and forest in the area, and even through habit? Because you obviously identified that common buzzard or buzzard, shall we say, by something that you had noticed that showed to point towards a step buzzard. So what are some of those features that you might be able to explain?
Well, yeah, I'll do my best to explain, but like I said earlier, it's quite difficult to explain sometimes when I identify a bird, because, like I said, I didn't learn from the books on identification features. I kind of just have this my own points. But yeah, so with your forest buzzards, obviously they've got a lot of white in them and that light brown and a pale eye most of the time. And then they have a certain head shape as opposed to your jackal buzzard and your common buzzard. Your common buzzard and your forest buzzard are very much alike in their shape and whatnot, but there is small differences that I guess I'm able to notice because I have had them close up to me. So yeah, and you get so many different colors on these birds. So I usually just fall back onto this is the head shape, and your jackal buzzard most of the time has a rufous tail. And there's a couple things that I fall back onto, but usually if I can say body shape and wing shape, if they in flight, those are some things that I look at. Yeah.
Okay, and do the forest and the common have a difference in head shape to the jackal?
Yes, according to me, they do. The jackal buzzard has a much bigger head, and it's almost rounder, and they have a bigger eye than your steppe and your forest buzzard. Yeah, your steppe and your forest buzzard is very difficult when it comes to head shapes, but there is small differences which I am able to notice. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Josh. That's interesting.
All right, cool. And then you also told me a story when we had our pre-podcast interview about when you were in a field, you and Mark, when you were in a field and a whole bunch of swifts flew over, and one of you said something, it was like an Alpine swift, and the other one corrected. So can you tell me that story?
Yeah, so one of the first times I met Mark, we were birding in the George Botanical Gardens, and there was a couple of swifts in the sky, and there was also a peregrine falcon. It must have been a TSL, a male bird, but Mark had identified it as an Alpine swift, and he said, "Hey, do you see the Alpine swift?" And I said to him, "No, wait, that's a peregrine falcon." So yeah, maybe Mark can explain a little bit more about the story.
Yeah, well, yeah, we were standing in the parking lot, and so I just before I said hi to Josh, I said I didn't want him to miss it because I thought it might be a new bird for him. Because at this stage, even though it's just a few months ago, he was still, I could say, more of a beginner bird. So I said, check out that there's an Alpine swift. You see that big one flying between the white trump swifts? And he said, where? Do you see that? I don't see the Alpine swifts. Do you see that peregrine falcon? I was like, no, that's the Alpine swift. And so he actually corrected me, and we figured out, and I totally agree, that was definitely a peregrine falcon. So I think being a raptor enthusiast and growing up with this knowledge, you kind of have a speciality to notice the shapes and gist of raptors a lot easier than normal birders do, because you've grown up mainly focusing on them. So I think that having that, you have so much more of an advantage in identifying raptors, and you kind of nailed me there, as I thought it was a swift, and it was actually a falcon. But then again, Alpine swifts are one of the biggest swifts in the world, so I wasn't too off course, but I was definitely wrong.
That's true. So we've all identified a rock dove as something else already, I'm sure. But yeah, anyway, so you and Mark, you and Josh have birded together for a while now. How long have you guys actually been birding together, and how has your friendship actually helped one another?
Well, I believe we actually started getting together more often after lockdown. The regulations eased a bit, and you know, after lockdown, people started getting out a bit more, and more rarities were starting to get found. So as far as I can remember it, a rare bird would rock up in Mossel Bay or in Plettenberg Bay, and Josh would kind of say he's interested or what's this, and I'd say, well, listen, it's a rarity. I want to go see it. It's big. That's all you need to know. So in a nutshell, he would end up giving me a lift, and he would kind of get guided to see this rarity that he wasn't too sure about. But in the process, we both learned, and I got lifts with Josh. And so from then on, we haven't just been twitching together. We've kind of developed to go out on more birding outings, and not just Josh and I, but Justin would come along too, and we'd be the three of us birding. And yeah, so I think it basically started just after lockdown, developed from going on twitches together to see these special birds, and now we've kind of got onto going on our private birding outings every now and then. So through that, our friendship has kind of grown and got to know each other better. And yeah, it's been fun.
And then finally, just before we leave, I just want to find out, how can people get more involved in raptor rehabilitation?
Yeah, so to get more involved in raptor rehabilitation, you would have to start off by volunteering somewhere. And when you start volunteering, you don't just go straight into working with the birds. You start at the bottom, and you start by cleaning cages or rather cleaning enclosures, and maybe preparing some food and doing some dirty work, and then slowly, as you progress, you start to help out with more things, and you start to learn more. So I'd say find your nearest wildlife rehabilitation center or something similar to that, and inquire about volunteering. But yeah, to do rehabilitation, it's obviously all permitted, so don't try it by yourself. Rather find a center and ask them how you can help them.
Thanks so much, Josh and Mark.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed the chat. Thanks, Chris.
I think I've taken down some notes of the buzzards.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And I think I'm going to get you back on the show sometime again, Josh, because if I need some help identifying a raptor, I'm definitely going to come to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. You can message me anytime or give me a call. That sounds great.
Once again, I just want to thank Josh for such an awesome podcast. I also want to thank majestic for being my co-host tonight. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe to us on your preferred podcast player. And until next time, happy birding.